right, I want to say welcome to everyone to this meeting. I'm extremely impressed with the lineup. We have 3 screens in front of us with a direct link to Monrovia, and I see several ministers, ambassadors, and the RC Yacoub there, and civil society. So thank you very much for that. And here in New York, impressive. Maybe it's the cold outside that brings everyone into the meetings this morning, but I'm very, very impressed here as well. Several ambassadors, most, if not all countries active in the configuration are here. World Bank is represented both in Monrovia and here in New York. And not least, we are honored with the presence of the Foreign Minister of Liberia, who've traveled from Monrovia to be with us today. So that's extremely, I'm really happy about this, representation and participation this morning. I'd like to also, of course, direct a special mention to the fact that the Minister of Finance and Development and Planning, Mr. Twea, is present in Monrovia with us, and the Minister of Internal Affairs, Mr. Sirleaf. Again, truly appreciate your engagement with us this morning. And our Liberian ambassador, it's not the first time in the PBC, but it's an honor to have you here, and thank you very much for continuing the excellent cooperations that we've had with between Sweden and Liberia in this commission. Before giving the floor to distinguished speakers, I'd like to outline briefly the objectives of the meeting this morning. To my mind, very important discussions ahead of us, aiming to inform New York about your devoted work on the ground with the Pro-Poor Agenda for Prosperity and Development, which encompasses the Statement of Mutual Commitments and the Peacebuilding Plan. Plans that have been worked out extensively with, through the collaboration of this configuration and the government and the UN in Monrovia. As you are aware, this configuration has committed to accompany Liberia in its efforts to consolidate peace. Our mandate is to bring together all relevant actors to marshal resources and to advise on and propose integrated strategies for peace building. Equally important, we have a mandate to help improving the coordination of all relevant international actors within and outside the United Nations. As I said when I briefed the Security Council last spring, and which was very clear during my last trip to Monrovia in March, together with the Deputy Secretary General, there is a need to balance 2 realities when it comes to Liberia. On the one hand, very impressive progress has been made over the last few years, illustrated very well in the holding of peaceful and democratic elections and the transfer of power in a democratic and peaceful way, and the fact that all Liberians have really used the democratic space as a means to pursue their political agendas. On the other hand, we know that the situation in Liberia remains complex, and as the country is graduating from a country with a peacekeeping mission to a development context, issues around fragility, security, the fragility surrounding the human security dimension, governance, etc., challenges remain. Root causes of the conflict still need to be addressed, and I think the development plan is key in addressing these issues, and I think it very well acknowledges the important link between development and sustaining peace. Liberia is also an important case to draw lessons from when it comes to transitions of UN peacekeeping missions and the gradual, calibrated withdrawal of UNMIL and the transfer into a strong country team has been, I remember how the apprehensions that were surrounding this withdrawal and the drawdown and the closure of the mission, but it's very good to see how all that came together in a successful way. Now, so if Liberia showcases successful transitions, there needs to be, and I think this is a lessons learned, there needs to be a transitional package which includes strong financial commitment from the international community and the UN system. And this is why the Peacebuilding Commission now, I believe, has a vital role to play to keep the international attention on Liberia, including gearing up the right kind of support behind the government and the active participation of civil society. I see this meeting as a launch of an interactive process to ensure continued relevance of the Peacebuilding Commission to the government of Liberia, and that we always look at how we ensure that there's added value to other processes going on, including locally in Monrovia. So for that purpose, it is of utmost importance, I believe, to first hear from the government about where you stand and how you want to continue cooperation and seeking support from the Peacebuilding Commission. I want to, before leaving over the floor to the government representatives, I want to say that there are test cases for any government. The government of Liberia has been in power now for just about a little bit more than a year. And of course, this is a test case also for the popularity and the support of the population in terms of delivery. So I'd like to start by giving the floor to Foreign Minister Mr. Milton Findlay here. I think everyone is eager to hear your remarks, and then we'll pass the floor over to the ministers present in Monrovia. So please, Mr. Minister, welcome again.
Thank you. His Excellency Ambassador Skoog, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency Dr. George Manawia, President of the Republic of Liberia, let me begin by conveying special thanks to you, Ambassador Skoog, for convening this critical and valuable Peacebuilding Commission meeting on Liberia. I am sure you can infer from my presence here today that this meeting is also of paramount interest and importance to His Excellency Dr. George Manawia, the government and people of Liberia. I am particularly grateful for the focus of this meeting and the immense attention it has received. I pay special tribute to United Nations family, regional organizations, and member states for the overwhelming support Liberia continues to receive in our unrelenting pursuit for sustainable peace and economic recovery. You all witnessed the historical, monumental, and peaceful transmission of power in Liberia, principally as a result of the resolve of Liberians and the positive translation of the invaluable assistance from the international community, particularly the United Nations. It is also a manifestation of our growing and promising democracy, which was confirmed by His Excellency President Weah in his nationwide address when he said, and I quote, "And so today I stand before you with confidence and declare that the state of our nation is strong, peaceful, united, stable, and promising, with great prospect for a better future for all." Very soon, you will hear from the Liberian ambassador to the United Nations on other particular steps the government of Liberia has taken in response to the much-needed reforms. But please allow me to mention a few. Recently, Liberia passed the Land Right Act, as well as the Local Government Act. These landmark acts are cardinal to the stabilization and development of our country. With the Land Right Act, there is so much needed to be done to ensure an effective implementation, including the establishment of a land governance structure. This too will need financial and expert support. Also, in an effort to curb the persistent threat of violence against women. Enforcement of the rape law is being strengthened. And we, and we are poised as a government to pass the pending domestic violence law. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, peacebuilding and the consolidation of peace are priority of the Liberian government, just as economic development is. We are aware that preventing conflict and building sustainable peace come with a considerable cost. And we are faced with multiplicity of challenges, particularly natural and capital resources remain scarce. Unless we trust that following this meeting, which provide the necessary platform for the government of Liberia to present and launch its pro-poor development agenda at the United Nations, Liberia multi-partner trust funds will be further able to attract the necessary and predictable funding it needs. We strongly believe it is a significant tool in actualizing our 5-year pro-poor agenda for prosperity and development. An ideal approach to reinforce stability and success in Liberia. Our priority for which this fund will be used are the security sector, development, strengthening governance, justice system, advanced national reconciliation, and the respect for human rights and dignity, among others. To this end, we would appreciate renewed commitment from actors, including the United Nations, regional and sub-regional organizations, member state, international partners, and many others. Let me conclude by expressing deep appreciation for this meeting, for all of your support, especially for the recent approval by the Peacebuilding Fund of $5 million towards peacebuilding and reconciliation programs in Liberia. I wish us all a productive discussion as we will now hear from the Minister of Finance and Development Planning of Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your intervention and even more importantly that you have traveled all the way here today and to be with us. And you mentioned some very important aspects, and I think perhaps most importantly, the connection, of course, between socio-economic development and sustaining peace. So thank you very much for that. And in line with what you said, I'd like to pass the floor now over to our friends in Monrovia and invite the Minister of Finance and Development Planning, Mr. Twea, to take the floor, please. Ms. Minister, good to see you again, and you have the floor. We do not have. Okay.
Hello? Okay. Let me preface my remarks by saying I couldn't agree with you more, Ambassador Skoog, when you said that the situation here remains complex. And I think in terms of the discussion, it's really critical that that complexity forms the basis and the nexus of the conversation, because we tend to lose sight of it. We're making some progress, but you always want to think about that complexity. I use this opportunity to thank the Peacebuilding Commission for convening this ambassadorial level meeting on the pro-poor agenda for prosperity and development. And thank the PBC for all of its work, the United Nations family for the enormous role it played in transitioning the country from war to peace. We're critically in the post-UNMIL transition phase. We're in another set of transition. 1 year after UNMIL's departure, you probably need about 3 years of transition to say you're out of the woods. So we're in a post-transition phase. I'd like to part of the complex story there. Also want to thank the PBC for the initial support of $5 million to the Liberia Multi-Partner Trust Fund. There was a joint steering committee held at the Ministry of Finance that preliminarily approved a set of projects. And so I know there's going to be another meeting, but the stage is now set for execution. These projects will focus on reconciliation, vulnerability, social protection, youth development, women empowerment, and agriculture, all of the things that have resonance for the PBC and for sustaining the peace in the country. So we know, we thank you, and we look forward to a more meaningful role in all of this. I would like to say that, yes, the PAPD has now been launched. I have a copy here of the Pro Agenda for Prosperity and Development. I think we're preparing some copies to send over there to you very soon. You have some copies. Let me thank all of the partners who played a very meaningful role in the construction of this document. Through rave reviews, through feedbacks, everybody around the table had their say. And so I can say here it's a collectively owned document. Whatever it promises, we hope we can collectively pursue those. What the challenges are, we can collectively own it. But it's been an extraordinary round of partnership and coordination in this document, which presages good fortune for the kind of coordination that we will see in its implementation and delivery. But I'll give a part of the complex story here, what the plan looks to achieve, and what the complexity of that challenge is in the plan. The plan has 4 pillars. Pillar 1 actually wants to give power to the Liberian people. That's critical. And by that we mean transforming the whole human development space. Human development remains challenged in Liberia. We need to transform that space over the next 5 years. That means, for example, closing the teacher gap. Around 10,000 teachers need to be placed in schools so that every child, for example, can have a student, every classroom can have a teacher. And that means also putting 7,000 more teachers on the government payroll and made extraordinarily difficult fiscal times. So that's important to remember. It means improving outcomes, teacher and student outcomes. Student-teacher ratio range from 158 students to 1 teacher for primary school and 93 students to a teacher in the secondary school. That's a humongous challenge, and extraordinary coordination, resource mobilization will be needed, effective delivery to really counter that challenge. About 32% of our primary school students are dropping out of school. Okay? In Kenya, this number is 7%. So we need to do better than that. And then that's a challenge that we embrace. But through the PAPD delivery, we look to deliver that. 4 out of every 30,000 high school students who sit exams in Liberia are passing math and English. 4 out of 35,000. That's an extraordinary number. And that cannot continue. That means mathematics skills, science skills, STEM subjects have to be reinforced in school. So you see the complexity of the human capital landscape there. On the health side, reducing maternal mortality, infant mortality, child stunting are all critical. Under 5 in 2016 to now it's around 6 to 7 deaths per 1,000 live births. In Rwanda, that number is 32 per 1,000. So we have quite a ways to go there. Maternal mortality, 774 deaths per 100,000 population. Yeah, Sub-Saharan African average is around 551. In the PAPD, we're looking to go around 500. I think Rwanda has 290. So we have quite some ways to go. But I think with coordinated effort, we will get there. Improving access to quality care, particularly for people in the rural areas. The disadvantaged population is going to be key for the PAPD. Another aspect of giving power to the people is transforming the youth development space. You will agree with me, Ambassador, that the youth challenge actually is a national security challenge. And unless we address this problem, we will have to take recourse to the PBC program for a very long time, because there is no solution for sustainable peace unless you find a way to get young people on the path of employment and employability. And we're working with all of our partners, to develop technical vocational education programs to address this challenge. The government will be committing more resources to youth development, all of that. Social protection and vulnerability. This is also key. At a time where inflation is high, inflation exacts a telling price on the poor because every stretch of inflation deprives the poor of their income. So social protection is a way of cushioning the poor from the impact of inflation. So we're looking at, in the plan, deepening social protection reaches as a way of addressing income challenges for vulnerable populations. The second pillar is the economy and jobs. This is the pillar where I think the transformation has to happen. This pillar talks about massive investment in infrastructure. Right now, everybody knows that roads is the mantra. The president is the big champion of our roads agenda. We have around 12,000 kilometers of roads, and only about 6 to 7% of that is paved. I think the program logic of the plan revolves around infrastructure, addressing the infrastructure gap. We'll be looking to develop at least a minimum of 500 kilometers of roads over the next 5 years. That's on the conservative side. Optimistically, when things go good, we could run into 800 to 900 kilometers. But these are not going to be roads to nowhere. We want to ensure that our road projects are bankable. We do have evidence from the past that there were quite some roads developed, but we do not see economic activity surrounding the roads. So the program logic that when you build roads, development follows in some cases is a stretch, because we do have evidence that roads have been built and we haven't seen the agricultural productivity commensurate to that development. This is why we stand on the lessons of the past 12 years, so that roads, and we're scaling up agriculture, but that we know that we're building roads to have economic meaning and resonance, so that these roads pay for themselves. So we're talking about the coastal highway, which is around some 500 kilometers of road. The stretch from Ganta to Zwedru to Hapo, which is funded by the World Bank. The African Development Bank are all in there. All of these will connect all county capitals, which again will have implications for health and education. We are not able to get good teachers probably in the rural areas because the roads are bad. If we fix those roads, we can address some of the teacher challenges there. The same thing with health workers. Nobody wants to leave Monrovia if you're going to be locked on the roads for 1 week to travel back. So we see some impact there. On the electricity front, we want to increase the generating capacity as well as the transmission capacity. Thanks to support from all of our partners, we now have the Mount Coffee hydroelectric facility, which was refurbished 2 years ago. One of the challenges has been the transmission, the ability to evacuate the power it generates. We're reaching the point where we will be able to do that. There are lots of transmission projects ongoing funded by the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and the European Union. So we'll be able, I would say in 18 months, the electricity landscape is going to be radically different than we have today. Because a lot of work is ongoing. We have the CLSG lines. Those are the transmission lines that are going to run through Cote d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea. Those lines, I'm told, that project will be over by December this year. Latest, March, April next year, we should have the lines fully functional. This will enhance our ability to import cheap electricity from neighboring countries and provide opportunities for investment. Since the cost of power here is still high at 35 cents per kilowatt hour, though an improvement 4 or 5 years ago from 55 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're seeing some movements there. I'd like to flag up the possibility here of the VIA project. At the mouth of the Mount Coffee, there is a river, and there's a possibility. The World Bank has done some feasibility study on that. It shows that when we dam the Mount Coffee, we can generate as much as, and cascade that, we can generate as much as 500 megawatts. This is the future of electricity transformation in the country. And we look to have investors explore this possibility because it's a bankable project and it's quite transformative. Agriculture transformation is the elephant in the room in this area. In the president's recent address, State of the Nation address, he flagged this. The president did say that there's enormous amounts of resources afloat into agriculture, as is the case in many African countries, yet we remain food insecure. And so I think the president wants to take the bull by the horn, bring all partners, bring all government together to take a look at what can happen in agriculture space. What is it that we need to do now? How do we optimize our investments? How do we deliver better? How do we account for results better? I think that's going to happen. On Monday, the president will lead the government at the Ministry of Agriculture. I hope we will have partners represented in our meeting as well to kind of take a fresh look, reset in the agriculture space to ensure that issues of rice production, I mean, this country eats rice more than anything in the world, and we're not able to produce that. This is having serious impact on our macroeconomics. So that conversation will be a pragmatic, practical approach. Everybody, all hands on deck in the agriculture space. The other aspect is a chapter, I think the pillar, is on sustaining the peace, and this pertains mainly to the PBC here. We had unmilled troops, some 16,000, I'm not mistaken, at some point here managing our peace, and now they're gone. And sometimes, and again, this puts into relief the complexity. When you have 15,000 to 10,000 armed personnel managing your peace and they're no longer here, and you have a police force now of 3,000 when you need around 8,000 police troops, then it begs the question, how are you managing the peace? So we are winging it as we go along. There are significant budget implications for scaling up investment in the security sector after the withdrawal of UNMIL. We're beginning to see situations around the country where, because of the absence of police presence, sometimes citizens take matters into their own hands. So on the backdrop, what the government is responding to is calling for a security sector meeting, and I hope the partners will be involved in it, where the government can identify critical investment in the security sector. We need to ramp up police presence across the country. We need to invest in logistics because the constraints are there. It's difficult while you're trying to build roads, which is the president's priority, finding monies. There's a sense that you're crowding out investments needed in the security sector because people want to see gains in roads and other things. So it's a kind of balancing act. But there is a meeting under my leadership that's going to find resources, and I'm throwing this out to the partners here and to the PVC so that we take cognizance of this challenge. And think the Liberia Multi-Partner Trust Fund can be an avenue where we can take a fresh look at this as well. The other pillar is on transparency and governance. There is a need for increased transparency, increased support to transparency and accountability institutions. We must remain accountable in our use of public resources. We must support auditing entities, and the government has demonstrated that commitment, and it will continue to do so as part of our budget process. I think there have been a lot of recommendations from auditors, the GAC that's lying, and we're looking to see how we can prioritize implementation of these recommendations. We've made that commitment. We may not be able to execute all of the recommendations, but at least the binding constraints, the major ones, so that we have credibility on that. The fight against corruption, it's a major thing that we need to continue to be on. There are various indices that monitor the country's perception of corruption. Quite recently, we're paying close attention to those. The approach is that, look, one of the ways the government is dealing with this is to reform the budget process. And lots of monies in the past 10 years have gone into areas that they didn't need to go into. So in the area of wage and pension reform, for example, yesterday there were protesters at the Ministry of Finance because what we're trying to do now is reduce our pension budget. There were 6,000 persons we've been paying for. We're rationalizing that through the Social Security system, and we're finding that only 4,000 to 5,000 have turned up for validation. So technically, we could take about 9,000 persons from the payroll. This can ensure huge savings. In reforming the wage bill, we think we're looking at around 10 million of savings. This is the most practical way to fight corruption. When you save those resources and redeploy them in roads, in human development, in security, and then you're really, really fighting corruption. More transparency will be needed. I think we want to find a way to report more transparently. As Minister, I have ordered a redesign of the Ministry of Finance's website so that information is more transparent, so that the reports that partners need and the public needs can easily be accessed from the Ministry of Finance website. The ultimate goal is to have the OECD database where anybody can go and see what's happening to official development assistance over the last 50 years. We want to replicate that model on the ministry's website. So I'm going to be calling for consultants who can do what the OECD has on its database and locate that on the Ministry of Finance website for full transparency. Everybody can go in and look at maternal mortality and see all of the monies that the government partners are spending and how they are moving the development needle on those different indicators. May take 6 months, may take a year to develop that, but we're committing resources as a government to doing that. So at the end of the day, it's not about the fiscal outturns as buried, it's all visible on the page. And everybody around the world can access development data in Liberia. For all of this to happen, it has to be about delivery and result. I think this is where Africa is challenged. How do we deliver so that resources are spent effectively and efficiently? I like to quote the WHO statistics that says around a third of resources in the health sector is wasted. In Liberia, that wastage is very, very huge because we're already resource constrained. And so if it's true that a third of our resources is not spent optimally, then even if we're finding more resources, the theory is that those two will be wasted unless all of us together can design a framework that prevents this from happening. So delivery is going to be key, stronger partnership and coordination with all of our development partners so that we have the kind of results that we demand, that we want, that people expect. We're going to see that over the next 5 years. It's a conversation that we're having in the next week or so to see now that we have the PAPD, what kind of delivery mechanism, what kind of reporting, what kind of coordination. I know the president should have had a coordination meeting with our partners. The president does have a meeting, I think, every quarter now with all of the development partners. That's in that same direction, to hear from the partners, get first-hand feedback from their perspective about where the country is going, and then so that they too can hear from him. And then so beyond the president at the ministerial level, we'll have to put in place a coordination modality that ensures that we're spending more effectively than we have done in the past 5 or 10 years. The big elephant also is then financing the PAPD. The cost of the PAPD is around $6.2 billion. And so when you break that down, 60% of that funding is going to the economy and jobs, about 20% to power to the people, human development, social protection, and all that stuff. 10% to sustain the peace, which is a huge amount. It's 10%, but it's huge. 10% of $6.2 billion. If we have that, I think we'll make credible progress in the security space. And then 7% on governance, all of that. With the PAPD, we've been having discussions with the partner, doing a launch, a roadshow, an investment roadshow, and a donor conference, however we frame it. But to sit with, how do we generate additional resources for the plan? The private sector, in talking to investors, is critical. And so, we want investments to come to the country. We want partners to increase the support. So this conversation is going to happen now that we've launched the plan. We have it. And I think the next several weeks you're going to see movements in that direction. The domestic resource mobilization strategy. And as part of this, I'm going to come back to the national window to see how the national window can be located, situated as a conduit for this resource effort. I'm quite aware that there are limits to how much we can raise under the Liberia Multi-Partner Trust Fund, but whenever we raise, there can really resolve binding constraints in sustaining the peace in other areas outside reconciliation if it is used creatively, effectively. So we quite value funding coming through the Liberia Multi-Partner Trust Fund. On the infrastructure side, we will be looking for scaling up through the Liberia Infrastructure Trust Fund, which is currently financing the Ganta, Tabata to Zwedru stretch of the road. Quite recently, we received some donations from the German government, 60 million United States dollars. I'd like to thank you for that.
And
the British, the British, British was 60. Yeah. So we're looking forward to getting more. But this fund can be critical for scaling up infrastructure finance because it's building on the logic of the road fund. The road fund is supposed to generate between around 35 million a year. We look to grow that, and so we can really leverage this fund and mainstream the private sector into infrastructure financing. So all of this has to happen. So to just conclude, I'd like to reiterate the President's vision and commitment to transform this country. President George Weah inherited an enormously complex fiscal financial situation, but he's been able to stabilize, as he reported in his State of the Union Nation address. That he stabilized the economy, he maintained respect for the fundamental liberties of all Liberians, protected freedom of the press, free assembly were all guaranteed, and you know, he was able to accomplish quite a lot with reduced fiscal space. We're operating on probably 100 million less in revenue than we were in the past 10 years. Much better fiscal situation than we are today, but the President has solved some of the problems we were not able to solve then, even with greater resources. For example, he added 2,000 medical workers on the payroll because the health pool fund dried up. This is about $12 million a year, so he's being able to do that. He's been able to pay Liberia electricity debt, which is around $7 million. In just last year, in 8 months, he paid $7 million to the Liberia Electricity Corporation. We were not able to do that. And so because of that investment, liquidation, the LEC is in a much better position to do procurement and do the kind of things that are necessary to expand the electricity space. I think on the heel of all of these successes, I think the President looks in this new year to make big gains in agriculture, secure our peace by strengthening investments in the security sector, and continue the whole mobilization of resources to really make the PAPD successful. So looking back in 1 year, I say we've accomplished, but the challenges are many. But I think we look on the bright side that the possibilities are mammoth, provided that we all work concertedly to deliver the big gains for the country. And in this manner, I would like to thank all of the partners for all of the support. We look forward to the Peacebuilding Commission as a valuable partner in delivering and sustaining the peace space, but also in other aspects as well, because even some money from this is going for youth agriculture. And so this will be very important. Thank you very much.
Mr. Minister, thank you so much for in a very comprehensive way, going through the main tenets of the plan. Of course, it hasn't escaped anyone in this room that the timing of this meeting is very much sought to coincide with the presentation and the launch of the pro-poor agenda that you've just outlined to us. Seems to me that listening to your description of both the consultation process leading up to the plan and the main elements of it, as you have outlined it, it coincides very well with the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, which I always think is a good framework for any development and economic plan. So thank you very much, and also being very frank and open about the complexities and the challenges that remain. I'd like to offer the possibility for the Minister of Internal Affairs, if you want to add to what we've just heard, you have the floor, sir.
Salif, Minister of Internal Affairs. Your Excellency, Ambassador Olaf Scrooge, Chair of the Liberia Configuration of the Peacebuilding Commission, distinguished ambassadors and members of the Peacebuilding Commission, UN Resident Coordinator for Liberia and colleagues, honorable ministers here present, members of the civil society organizations distinguished ladies and gentlemen. In March 2017, the government, in collaboration with the United Nations, submitted the Liberia Peacebuilding Plan pursuant to Security Council Resolution 2333 in 2016. This plan provides a well-developed framework for sustaining peace and consolidates commitments across development, security, human rights efforts, and defines priority areas for mutual agreement in order to prevent relapse into conflict. The government's proper agenda for prosperity development was informed by this plan and other frameworks. Pillar 3 of the PAPD, Sustaining the Peace, emphasizes ending fragility and the root cause of conflict, aimed at promoting a cohesive society for sustainable development. This pillar attempts to address key challenges, including limited capacities in the security and rule of law sectors, slow progress in national reconciliation, and limited progress in implementing critical reforms. Despite these challenges, Liberia has made remarkable progress over the last 15 years. Consistent with the peace-building plan, notable progress has been made, including the peaceful transition from a democratically elected government to another one, passage of the Local Government Act, passage of the Land Rights Act, as well as revitalization of infrastructure for peace, including county and district peace committees, county security councils, and setting up of the National Center for Coordination of Early Response Mechanism, amongst others. While Pillar 3 and 4 of the PAPD outline areas of interest for peace building, the critical priority areas for peace building includes decentralization and national reconciliation. Decentralization is critical to reconciliation because both are mutually reinforcing and have strong interlink. In 2018, government invested over $1 million in these areas due to sharp decline in the revenue envelope and is, however, looking forward to additional investment of $17 million of a targeted $36 million over the period of the PAPD implementation. We are profoundly grateful to the Peace Building Support Organization, including the Peace Building Fund, for its tremendous financial support to peace building priorities over the years, and the initial investment of $5 million United States dollars in support of 4 new projects, financing through the Liberia Multi-Partner Trust Fund. In conclusion, we would like to seek additional financial and technical support from the United Nations and our donor partners in financing the peace-building priorities outlined above. Finally, we would like to encourage the Peace-Building Commission to continue to help mobilize coherent international support for addressing the peace-building priorities of the government. Once again, I say thank you very much for listening.
Mr. Minister, thank you very much for your intervention and your part in the government. I want to now pass the floor to Ms. Frances Greaves. I know from my various visits in Liberia that one of the real strengths in any transition is the vibrant role of civil society, and certainly that is an area where Liberia can benefit. So, Frances, I'm good to see you again on that side, and I'm eager, and everyone else is eager to hear your thoughts on the way forward and on the plan. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Standing on existing protocol, for civil society, our role has always been to buttress government's efforts, and now that we have a new development plan, is to ensure that as we move forward, we can strengthen the outreach into the counties to ensure that the people are involved in the process. Like we always say, civil society is that bridge between government and the people, and then it's also necessary. Looking at the 4 pillars of the PAPD, we say that power to the people is very essential. Over the years, Liberians have felt like they are not part of the process of decision making in the country, and as a result of that, that has been kind of tension because they don't know how decisions are made. But when they have the opportunity to have the information, it is better, and the kind of tension that would have existed had they not had the information will be minimized. Additionally, looking at the next step of the PAPD, we want to say as civil society that jobs creation is essential, and like the minister talked about the youth. You know, if we want to take a look at our not too distant past where it was the youth who were the bearers of the guns, we need to ensure that they are involved, they are engaged. Because presently, there are challenges with those disadvantaged youth that is referred to as Zogos, and they seem to be increasing. So there is a need to address that situation to ensure that they are minimized, and in terms of security tied into vulnerable youth, there's a need to strengthen security to ensure that the vulnerability of the youth is not being preyed upon by anybody to be used against the peaceful coexistence of Liberia. We also want to say that when it comes to governance and transparency, we need to do more and continue to strengthen the arms of reporting on all aspects of the PAPD to how donors are going to be able to give funding, but at the same time ensure that the information on implementation is trickled down enough for information, as well as being involved in the implementation aspect as Liberians. Many civil society groups have been involved in the past in implementing other plans, and they look forward to being a part. I hasten to add that the National Civil Society Council, as well as other civil society groups, were part of the development of the PAPD. So we are open with the information in it, and we look forward to strengthening the implementation. Lastly, in terms of the accountability aspect in governance, those institutions are responsible for those issues of transparency needs to also be strengthened. On that note, I think I'll take my seat and I'll ask any of my colleagues if they have anything to add to what I said earlier.
Thank you very much, Francis. And I forgot to mention a very important point, that as you are speaking on behalf of course, the National Civil Society Council of Liberia, and thank you and congratulations to you and to the government for what I understand has been a good consultative process leading up to the plan. And I think you very rightly stressed that civil society needs to be continuously engaged in the implementation and delivery of the plan. And I think a challenge in Liberia, as in so many other countries, has been always the effort to really have the provinces and the countryside feeling the benefits of the socio-economic agenda as well. So thank you for that. Last on my list, before we open up the floor to everyone, is to hear from our good friend Yakub El Hiyo, the resident coordinator. So Yakub, I'd like to give the floor to you now to give the UN perspective on this, and then we'll open up the floor both here and in Monrovia for member states and the World Bank and others who want to come in. Yakub.
Thank you very much, Ambassador School, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy about having this meeting at this particular moment, as the Minister of Finance said, just a few days after the formal launch of the PAPD. The timing is spot on. And I think all that has been said so far tells a story of a country that has really tried very hard to move on with a very complex transition, maintaining stability, but there is a lot of fragility. And I think it's the latter that I want us to keep in mind. Liberia is usually touted as a success story, and it is indeed a success story. In a very short period of time since 2003 when the war stopped, and now, the country has come a very long way. So it is a success story, and the first to take credit for that are the Liberian people themselves. The international community also shares a bit of that. But I would like us to really celebrate for 5 minutes and stop doing that and really look at Liberia not through the lens of celebration, but the lens of prevention. So prevention, 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 because the fragility is real. And our meeting today, I believe, is part of that effort to keep Liberia on the radar screen, not to assume that it is a box that is ticked. And here is where the PBC will, in my view, continue to have a very central role as we go forward to ensure that Liberia remains on the radar screen. 2 specific points, Mr. Chairman, related to the UN transition within the larger transition in Liberia. UNMIL is gone, and successfully so. And I'm raising this by way of reflection, but also by way of preparation for future transitions that the international community, including the PBC, will be working with. We moved from what was once the largest peacekeeping operation in the world to a regular UN presence in a very short period of time. And was it not for the tedious planning and preparations and anticipation and worry that we carried throughout the period of UNMIL preparing to leave, but also for the last 1 year, I think the situation today with the UN presence here would have been even more precarious. We were able, and thanks really to some of the member states that are around the table, that have helped us maintain a minimum capacity in the resident coordinator's office, especially in the areas of political, peace and development capability, to continue dealing with the residual issues and challenges that I wish had left with UNMIL. The country continues to struggle with those. The minister spoke about the fragility and the need to consolidate peace, and it is that peace that we must continue to work on. So we did this, but I think we did it in a sort of a freelancing way, self-initiative, left to the country to actually figure out how a resident coordinator's office could be strengthened in order to continue troubleshooting, working with others, chiefly the African Union and ECOWAS, on prevention and on mediation and conflict resolution. As we prepare for future transitions, I think this should be a system responsibility, and it should be funded adequately, and it shouldn't be left to self-initiative to sustain. As I speak, the capacity in this unit that we stood up in the resident coordinator's office when UNMIL left the political peace and development, it has 20 staff members. 16 of them are national staff and 4 are international. And by the end of this month, that unit will lose 75% of its capacity because contracts will be running out. We do have firm signals that funding would be coming, but it's the time sensitivity that is the issue here. Secondly, the ministers spoke about the Liberia Multi-Partner Trust Fund, and that was part of our transition planning in anticipation of the decline in funding that was going to face Liberia post-mission. And I am very happy and I'm very grateful to all that have helped us stand up the Liberia Multi-Partner Trust Fund. It's a very smart tool to continue doing the kind of work that cannot really be done agency by agency, but the kind of work that needs to be done by all agencies working together, including with the national counterparts, to consolidate peace. I'm not talking about mandated agency by agency activities. UNICEF will find money to do under 5 vaccination because it's UNICEF's responsibility to do that. and others will do the same with their respective areas of mandate. But for the UN to work together to deliver on peace consolidation is a tough one, and it requires resources that should come only through pooled funding, such as the Liberian Multi-Partner Trust Fund. So I'm seizing this opportunity here to flag the importance of supporting the funding or the financing of this facility, which serves two purposes. And this will be my last point. It serves the purpose of forcing the UN to work better with itself, because when there is pooled funding, people play by the rules. But it also helps, and it will be transforming in less than a year, into the fund that will accompany the new generation of the UNDAF, the UN Development Assistance Framework, which will be hand in hand running and contributing to the realization of what the PAPD is aiming to deliver in Liberia. Second point is that within the LMPTF, and the Minister of Finance alluded to that, there is a national window. And that is the window through which funding going straight to national institutions that are pre-qualified, i.e. they have met audit checks and control requirements to implement programs that are within the PAPD framework. So it's a very important tool and facility that is needed as we go forward, because peace consolidation cannot be done on project-to-project basis and on voluntary contributions that may or may not come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much to you, RC, for your intervention and for the work you've done. I can testify here that you have been a crucial part as a chef d'orchestre in this improvised but successful, so far successful transition from UNMIL to a strong country team. And thank you also for stressing the fragilities that still exist, including in the UN presence there, and your, I think, very valuable arguments in favor of all of us trying to come up with support financially and otherwise, including through the trust fund. Colleagues, there seems to be one more fragility here, and it is the link, the internet link, whatever it is. We lost you for a short moment, but it's still working now. I understand that in the translation there is some difficulty sometimes, so please bear with us. But I think that's also a call for us to be succinct and brief in our interventions that will now follow. I will open the floor, starting here in New York first. And please, I recommend that let's make use of the fact that we have an impressive lineup of government representatives, the RC, etc. here. So ask questions, make recommendations, but let's be succinct and to the point. I wanted to start by giving the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for convening this meeting to help Liberia mobilize further international support to implement these peace-building priorities. We are grateful for your leadership in both the PBC and the Security Council to accompany Liberia in its critical period of transition. You played an important role in raising awareness on the need for the UN to provide adequate support to Liberia after the withdrawal of UNMIL. I also wish to thank Minister Milton Findley and Minister Tuea for presenting Liberia's National Development Plan to the Commission, and to the other briefers for their informative briefings. Following the successful elections last year, despite many challenges, the government under President Tuea seems to be making headway in strengthening the foundation to achieve sustainable development and peace. We are especially pleased to see efforts to strengthen the education and private sectors, create jobs for the youth, and build infrastructure. In fact, these are the areas that Korea focused after the Korean War to develop our economy and sustain peace. While 1/3 of our foreign aid was directed into building our education and health system, 2/3 of the aid was channeled into developing industries by strengthening our domestic private sector. As the PBC should explore the concrete ways to help the Liberian government address the gaps in the areas of capacity and financing in a coherent manner, including through the Multi-Partnership Trust Fund. The trust fund could be an effective tool to help the empowered resident coordinator to better coordinate the UN country team and other stakeholders on the ground. The Commission could also consider working with the resident coordinator to help mobilize the relevant stakeholders to implement one or two priorities of the National Development Plan. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, including for sharing experiences from the Korean transitions in the past. I have Ireland, Japan, Egypt, UK, and Norway on my list. Ireland.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here and have a chance to speak. Ireland and Liberia have enjoyed very close ties over recent years. We had a deployment of peacekeepers with UNMIL for some years, and our mission on the ground in Monrovia now is very active in supporting Liberia across a range of areas in the health sector, on rule of law projects, on gender projects. In fact, last year we upgraded our mission to an embassy, and I'm delighted to see our Chargé, Kate Brady, on the screen there. We've heard, and of course there are many challenges still remaining, but I think we all recognise the very significant progress that has been made over the last 15 years, and the conclusion of UNMIL was a sign of it. Ultimately, that's down to the hard work of the Liberian people and their commitment and dedication to peace. But I think you know, and we can reassure you, that your partners are going to be with you on the next steps in the journey as well. Minister Tway and others have spoken about the pro-poor agenda. We congratulate you on that. It's a really ambitious agenda and plan. It shows the ambition not just of the government but of the people of Liberia. I think all the ministers have spoken about the impressive array of reforms and projects underway, so just in the interest of keeping brief, I'll just focus on one point. We very much welcome the strong focus on the critical role of women and girls, the role they have to play in development and peace in Liberia. This is something that's really important, and we look forward to seeing an inclusive approach playing out in the implementation and evaluation of the pro-agenda for prosperity and development. Ireland is chair of the Commission on the Status of Women, and in the next couple of weeks we'll go into our annual session here. The topic this year is social protection, and I think the importance of social protection, if we're to meet, as you said, Ambassador, the 2030 agenda goals, also the AU's own goals in its 2063 agenda, if we're going to try and meet those, we really need to make sure we're investing in and we're building social protection systems and that infrastructure to deliver on those. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ireland. I remember when Ireland and Sweden had the joint contingent in the peacekeeping operation in Liberia. Fond memories of that. Thank you very much. Japan, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. And welcome back to the PBC meeting. And I also welcome the Honorable Minister to the PBC meeting. We're grateful for this opportunity to hear your view in person about the progress of Liberia's sustaining peace agenda. In particular, in your statement, I'm very impressed about you underline the two issues, peacebuilding and development in the equal-footed manner. This is the crux of this configurations meeting's purpose. So I would like to echo that on those 2 points, that all the like-minded countries of the PBC meeting would take keen interest and also follow up in substantial measures. I also thank Ms. Greaves from Maputo for your valuable contribution to today's discussion. Civil society actors are crucial players in Liberia's sustaining peace efforts. We're pleased to be updated on the essential aspects for Liberian peace consolidation, such as strengthening the judicial sector, land reform, decentralization, and reconciliation dialogue, and the steps taken by the government. Well, taking today's opportunity, I'd like to highlight the following 4 points. The first, Japan welcomes the pro-poor agenda for prosperity and development planned under the strong leadership of President Uea under the ownership of the Liberian government. I'd like to also underline the importance of the ownership of the Liberian government. We took note the President highlighted the pro-poor agenda at the annual message to the National Assembly this Monday. Japan will continue to support sustaining peace in Liberia in alignment with the agenda. Second, we commend the PBF's work in Liberia, which also aligns with the priority areas of the government. We believe that sharing outcomes of the PBS programs in Liberia would provide incentives for the member states to consider further contributions. We would like to see more encouraging outcomes, results out of the implementation of PBS programs. That would be the strongest ammunition for us to talk to our capitals to get more fund on PBS programs. So in this connection, we expect the PBSO will continue effective sharing with us, including here at the PBC. Third, Japan believes the Liberia Multi-Partner Trust Fund embodies the Secretary General's peacebuilding and sustaining peace initiatives and strengthens coherence on the ground. We recognize that we as the member states need to take efforts to support the Secretary General's agenda. The more we learn about the successes of these initiatives, the more we can have opportunities to consider further support. In this connection, we can use the PBC as a platform to hear of the achievements of both the LMPT Fund and the PBF. And furthermore, the PBC is uniquely positioned to seek synergies between these two funds. As Japan is currently positively considering our contributions to the implementation of the pro-poor agenda, we believe that using the PBC to highlight the effectiveness of the PBF and LMPT Fund could help mobilize further support. Japan is also hopeful that as the new RC system is implemented on the ground, it will allow for the best possible division of labor between the PBSO and RC. Lastly, sustaining peace cannot be achieved at the national level without regional stability. As I mentioned at the meeting of the PBC's Sierra Leone configuration last week, regional perspectives are indispensable. After its successful transition last year, we hope Liberia can take on a leading role as a promoter of peace in the West African region. We believe it is important that the PBC maintains focus on regional perspectives to provide more holistic support for national sustaining peace efforts. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think your point on PBSO and the Peacebuilding Fund and how it relates, PBSO is here and we'll speak later on. And I also think your advice on the regional, taking a regional perspective is a very valuable one. I think that's another thing that has improved so much in West Africa over the years with the international or regional cooperation going on there. And I take it also to our new chair of the Peacebuilding Commission, Colombia, as an idea for further reflection inside the OC. I have Egypt, UK, and Norway next. Egypt.
Thank you, Ambassador, for convening this important and timely meeting indeed, especially that we believe that Liberia can be regarded as a special model for gradual success in this context. The first stage, which was peacekeeping, has been completed successfully, and now we are witnessing lots of sub-stages within the context of peace building, and we are looking forward, hand in hand with the Liberian government and people, to have the inauguration of the third stage, which is all about sustaining peace. And we also welcome, of course, the Foreign Minister of Liberia in New York here with us. Of course, Egypt, Liberia has traditional relations, and Liberia enjoys full support of the Egyptian government, not only on the bilateral political level through capitals and our embassy in Monrovia, but also within the context of multilateral affairs in New York, Geneva, and other places. We welcome the introduction of the Pro-Poor Agenda for Prosperity and Development that was made by the Minister of Finance as well as the Minister of Internal Affairs and the civil society representative. We believe that it's a very good and promising plan for the future, especially that it should be lasting for 5 years until 2023. We believe that it has very positive factors, including the empowerment of the Liberian people themselves and enhancing economic growth and creation of jobs and employment and how to sustain peace. And again, I refer to my initial sentence when we said that we are actually eager to see the third stage happening in Liberia. And of course, good governance as a fourth pillar. Again, we extend our full support, and I have just a technical question within the context of peace building, especially that we are going to be the president of the African Union in February all over this year, and then we have been elected as well as the vice chair of the Peacebuilding Commission. So we are actually interested to know the Liberian government's view on how can the Peacebuilding Commission support and help the Liberian government and people in implementing this plan, and what are the mechanisms that can be utilized in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Egypt, UK.
Thank you, and thanks to all the briefers today in Monrovia and here for the fascinating discussion we've had. I think the UK welcomes the PAPD, and particularly the kind of the frankness and the interconnectivity of the kind of discussion and the framing of it. We're very clear here that there are many different aspects and very many different routes to stability and prosperity, and I think you rightly touched on all of those within the action plan. I'd also like to just kind of echo the support for Liberia and the UN system for taking Liberia through from peacekeeping to a UN country team modality, and just the success that represents for the whole country. I think you rightly identified the kind of economy as a key part of sustaining peace and kind of developing prosperity within Liberia. And it's great to see that there's been some recovery in commodity prices and that the trade deficit has really improved. But there are obviously still risk factors. The inflation rate I kind of noticed particularly high, and I'd be interested to see if there are any kind of ideas about how that might be addressed in the future. But I have two more kind of practical questions. One is around we have these different mechanisms now. We have the multi-partner trust fund, we have the peacebuilding fund, we have the UN UNDAF, and we have the PAPD. And I just wonder, in practice, how are these things coordinated? What are the mechanisms to make sure that we have clear, achievable outcomes, and that the UN and the international community can support Liberia? And particularly in that context, how the enhanced RC office, what role they'll play in that kind of overall coordination. And the final point is around the private sector. Again, investment is absolutely key, and I think the measures you spoke about, cleaning the wage bill, are really important. They're really tough to do. So, you have our full support as the UK in doing those. But I also wonder, if kind of tackling corruption helps encourage investment and external kind of financial assistance to the country. But private sector also like to be involved in national planning and know where the kind of infrastructure plans and stuff are going to. So is there a mechanism whereby the private sector can engage with the government on the PAPD and how that might work? Thank you again.
Including for those